My people, life is not as it appears. The eyes can deceive and the heart can mislead. Sometimes the richest man in your city is the poorest man somewhere else. Today, I bring you the story of Laura and her husband, David Cole. A story that will break your heart, stir your soul, and remind you that not every luxury is built on honor. In Lagos, David Cole was a name that commanded respect. He was young, polished, and powerful. The kind of man who turned heads when he walked into a room. He owned estates in Lekki, luxury cars that never saw dust, and companies whose profits shocked even his rivals. People said he had the Midas touch. Everything he touched turned to gold. He was the man everyone envied and the man every woman wanted to marry. And indeed, he had already found the perfect woman, Laura, beautiful, gentle, and devoted. To her, David was not just a husband. He was her pride, her dream, her forever. Their love was the kind that made other couples sigh. They went to church together, held hands at events, and smiled for magazines. To everyone who saw them, they were the picture of success. But behind that picture was a truth darker than anyone could imagine. A year after their wedding, David began traveling to Dubai often. He said he was working on international real estate deals, expanding his empire. Laura believed him at first. Each time he returned, he brought new gifts, gold jewelry, luxury handbags, perfumes worth more than a teacher's yearly salary. He even surprised her with a Range Rover one Christmas. She was proud of him, but with time, something began to trouble her. He always avoided talking about his business. He took secret calls late at night and never let her meet his Dubai partners. And whenever she asked what exactly he did there, he would smile and say, "My love, don't worry." The less you know, the better. Those words planted a seed of suspicion in her heart. As months turned into years, David's wealth grew beyond comprehension. He bought a private jet, opened a charity foundation, and became a friend to governors and celebrities. But there were nights when Laura would wake up and find him staring blankly at the ceiling, sweating, restless. Sometimes he would cry quietly in his sleep. When she tried to wake him, he'd hold her hand and whisper, "I just don't want to lose it all." Lose what? She wondered. Money, fame, or something else? One day David left for Dubai again, but this time something inside Laura refused to rest. So she made a decision. She would follow him. Without telling him, she booked her own flight and arrived in Dubai 3 days later. She stayed with a friend in Dera and started following David from a distance. During the day, he looked every inch the businessman. Fine suits, luxury watches, business meetings, and polite smiles. But what happened that night was something no heart could prepare for. One evening, around midnight, Laura followed him again, this time through a narrow street behind the city market. He removed his designer jacket, stuffed it into a bag, and disappeared into a crowded alley. Laura crept closer and froze. There, under the glow of a flickering streetlight, was her husband, David Cole, the billionaire of Lagos, dressed in dirty clothes, sitting cross-legged on the ground with a begging bowl in his hands. He was begging. Tourists walked past, dropping dirhams, dollars, and coins into his bowl. He smiled at them, bowed his head, and whispered, "God bless you." Laura's lips trembled. Her husband, the man who dined with ministers and drove Rolls-Royce, was a beggar. Not a man helping beggars, not a man filming a documentary, a real beggar. Laura could barely stand. She hid behind a pillar, shaking, her tears falling silently. For 2 hours, she watched him. When he finally stood to leave, she followed him from afar. He went to a small apartment, counted the money, separated it neatly into envelopes, and transferred it into his Nigerian account using his phone. Everything became clear. His wealth didn't come from business. It came from begging. He was not just a beggar. He was a professional beggar, part of a secret underground network that earned millions from begging in foreign countries. The system was organized. They rotated streets, timed shifts, and had people collecting money from multiple countries. David was one of the best. He begged in Dubai, lived like a king in Lagos. Laura couldn't hold it anymore. The next morning, she went straight to his apartment. When he opened the door and saw her, his face turned pale. "And Laura, what are you doing here?" he stammered. She looked at him, her eyes filled with tears and disgust. Greater than, "I should ask you that, David. What are you doing here, sitting on the streets of Dubai with a bowl in your hand?" He went silent. His shoulders slumped. He didn't even try to lie. "You followed me," he said softly. "Laura, please, let me explain." But she shook her head. "Explain what?" "That the house we live in was built from the pity of strangers? That our wealth came from people who thought you were homeless?" David sat down heavily, defeated. He told her everything. Years ago, he had gone to Dubai as a struggling businessman. He lost everything: his investments, his partners, his hope. For days, he wandered the city, hungry and broke. One evening, an elderly man, a Nigerian like him, approached him and said, "If you sit with a begging bowl, tourists will give. They don't ask questions." At first, David refused. He said, "I'm a businessman, not a beggar." But hunger broke his pride. He tried it one night and made enough to buy food and a ticket home. But when he returned to Nigeria and saw how fast that small money grew through his real estate hustle, greed took over. He went back to Dubai the next month, not as a poor man, but as a planner. He learned the system, made connections, recruited others. Within a year, he had turned begging into a business. He hired people in Dubai to beg under his guidance. He registered shell companies in Nigeria to clean the money. And that was how he became a billionaire. He looked at Laura and whispered, "I did it for us, for our future. No one gets hurt. I found a system that works." But Laura shook her head. "You found shame, David. You turned humiliation into income and called it smart. How do you sleep knowing your wealth came from pity?" He looked away, tears filling his eyes. "I never thought it would go this far," he said. "Once you taste wealth, it becomes a cage." I couldn't stop. Laura sat quietly for a long time. She remembered all the moments they had shared, the laughter, the plans, the promises. And then she remembered the faces of those tourists dropping coins into his bowl. People who thought they were helping a poor man. She finally stood and said, "David, you're not the man I married. You may have everything, but you've lost your dignity." He tried to hold her hand, but she stepped back. "Don't touch me," she said. "I loved you because I thought you were honorable. But this is something I can't unsee." She left that day. When Laura returned to Nigeria, she packed her things and moved out of their mansion. David begged her to stay, promised to quit, to clean up his business. But the damage was done. She filed for separation quietly. She didn't expose him to the media, not because she wanted to protect him, but because she didn't want their child to grow up in scandal. Months later, David stopped traveling. He tried to build a legitimate business, but the stigma followed him in his heart. He couldn't look in the mirror without seeing the man with the bowl. He donated millions to charity, opened rehabilitation centers, helped real beggars, maybe to make peace with his past, maybe to feel human again. As for Laura, she started a small foundation for women and children. She lived simply, peacefully, without luxury, but with freedom. Years later, when their son turned 10, David visited her quietly. He looked older, thinner, humble. He brought no cars, no gifts, only a simple envelope with his apology written inside. He said, "I don't expect you to come back. I just want you to know I stopped. I've spent the last years trying to fix the mess I made." Laura looked at him, this time not with anger, but with tired forgiveness. She said softly, "You don't need to beg anymore, David. Not on the street, not from me. Go live right. Let the world see the man you were meant to be." She walked away, leaving him standing under the soft evening light, the billionaire who once begged in Dubai, finally begging for redemption. My people, let this story remind you, not all wealth comes from wisdom. Some fortunes are built from shame, dressed in fine clothes. David Cole was not poor. He was brilliant, ambitious, and capable. But greed turned him into a slave to an easy path. He mastered the art of begging, not for survival, but for status. And Laura? She learned that peace is more valuable than any diamond, that a clean conscience is worth more than 10 mansions. So, when you see a rich man boasting, ask yourself quietly, what road did he take to get there? Because sometimes the hands that drive Rolls Royce once held a begging bowl. And that, my friends, is the story of David Cole, the billionaire who begged on the streets of Dubai, and the woman who found the courage to walk away from riches built on shame.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.